Some nights don't just pass. They stay with you, in your chest, in your skin, in the quiet moments when the world slows down and memory gets louder than reality. It was just one rainy night, one city, one woman that should have meant nothing. But somehow, it became the night I still think about when I can't sleep. Her name was Elena. And before that night was over, she had turned a simple storm into the kind of memory a man carries for the rest of his life. It started in a coffee shop just after 10 p.m. Rain hammered the windows so hard, it sounded like the whole city was trying to get inside. The place was almost empty, just a tired barista cleaning counters, soft jazz playing in the background, and a few scattered strangers hiding from the storm. I had been working late, stopped in for coffee, mostly to wait out the weather. I remember shaking the rain from my jacket, stepping inside, and seeing her before I even made it to the counter. She was standing by the window with a ceramic mug wrapped in both hands, staring out at the street like she was watching a scene from her own life unfold in the reflection. Black dress, loose hair falling over one shoulder, a face that wasn't trying too hard to be beautiful, and somehow that made it impossible not to look at. There was something about her that didn't scream for attention. It pulled you in, quietly. I ordered my coffee, but I kept glancing over, not in a reckless, obvious way, just enough to notice the little things. How she traced the rim of her cup with her thumb, how she bit the inside of her cheek when she was thinking, how she looked calm on the outside, but her eyes carried something restless. When she finally looked over and caught me watching, I expected her to look away. She didn't. Instead, she gave me the smallest smile. Not polite, not flirtatious, just dangerous enough to make me walk over. "Looks like we're trapped here for a while," I said, nodding toward the storm outside. She turned back to the rain and smiled into her coffee. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Let it breathe." That was it. One sentence. And somehow, it felt like an invitation. So I asked if I could sit. She said yes. And just like that, the night began. Her name was Elena. She had a voice that made even simple words sound personal. Like every sentence meant more than it should. We started with the usual things: work, the weather, the city. How impossible it was to find decent coffee after 9 p.m. But the conversation changed fast. Some people make small talk feel like a wall. Elena made it feel like a doorway. Within minutes, we were talking about things strangers usually don't share. The loneliness of living in a crowded city. The kind of heartbreak that doesn't fully leave. The weird ache of missing versions of yourself you can never go back to. She told me she loved storms because they made everything feel honest. Honest? I asked. She nodded and leaned back in her chair. Rain strips away distractions. People slow down. They stop pretending they're in a rush. For a few hours, they're exactly where they are. I smiled. That sounds like something you've thought about a lot. Maybe I have. And what do you do when you're exactly where you are? She looked at me over the rim of her mug. I try not to lie to myself. Let it sink. There was no dramatic pause, no movie soundtrack swelling in the background. Just a few seconds of eye contact that felt too intimate for two people who had met less than half an hour ago. I laughed softly, trying to ease the tension. So what truth is the rain forcing you to admit tonight? She studied me for a second. That I didn't want to be alone. I should have looked away. I didn't. Maybe you're not, I said. Her expression softened, just barely. The barista announced they'd be closing in 10 minutes. Outside, the rain had only gotten worse. I offered to drive her home. She hesitated, just long enough to make me think she'd say no. Then picked up her purse and stood. Okay, she said. But only if you promise not to make me listen to terrible music. I laughed under my breath. I wish. The car had stalled in the middle of nowhere. Some quiet road lined with trees and old apartment buildings. Far enough from the main streets that it felt like the city had disappeared. I tried the engine again. Still dead. Elena looked out at the storm, then back at me. Well, she said softly, I guess the night isn't done with us yet. The city looked different from inside a car at night. Streetlights stretched across wet pavement like melted gold. Traffic was light, buildings blurred behind rain-streaked windows. The air inside the car was warm, carrying the scent of coffee, rain, and Elena's perfume. A soft, expensive kind of fragrance that didn't hit all at once, just stayed close enough to notice every time she moved. I put on a low playlist, old soul, slow vocals, nothing too obvious. Not bad, she said, glancing at me. That almost sounded like a compliment. Don't get used to it. I smiled and kept driving. For a while, she watched the rain race across the passenger side window. Her heels were off now, tucked beneath the seat, and she sat turned slightly toward me, one knee folded under her. Comfortable, relaxed, like she had known me longer than an hour. Then she asked, Do you always talk to strangers in coffee shops? Only the ones who look like they're secretly writing poetry in their head. She laughed. And what made you think that's what I was doing? The way you were looking out the window. She raised an eyebrow. You got all that from one look? No, I said. I got that from 5 or 6. She laughed again, and I felt something in my chest loosen. Then she grew quiet. Not awkward quiet. Thinking quiet. What? I asked. She turned toward me, slowly. I'm trying to decide if you're charming or just practiced. That sounds like a dangerous question. It is. And what's the answer so far? She let her eyes linger on me a second too long. I haven't decided yet. The rain got heavier. Visibility dropped. A few minutes later, I took a side road to avoid traffic. And that's when the car jerked once, then rolled to a stop. I tried the ignition again. Said nothing. Elena stared at the dashboard, then at me. Please tell me this is your idea of dramatic tension. I laughed under my breath. I wish. The car had stalled in the middle of nowhere. Some quiet road lined with trees and old apartment buildings. Far enough from the main streets that it felt like the city had disappeared. I tried the engine again. Still dead. Elena looked out at the storm, then back at me. Well, she said softly, I guess the night isn't done with us yet. The rain hit the windshield in wild, uneven waves. I turned the key one more time, then gave up, and leaned back in my seat. I'm sorry, I said. This is not how I usually impress women. Who said I'm not impressed? She asked. I looked at her. She was smiling, that slow, unreadable smile of hers. And in the dim glow from the dashboard, she looked almost unreal. Softer, closer, like the night had narrowed until there was nothing left but the sound of rain and the shape of her face in the dark. The heater had died with the engine, and after a few minutes the car started to cool. Elena rubbed her hands together and shivered once. Without thinking, I took off my jacket and held it out to her. She looked at it, then at me. And what about you? I'll survive. She slipped it over her shoulders. It was too big on her, and somehow that made her look even more beautiful. She pulled the collar closer and breathed in softly. It smells like you. The words were simple, but the way she said them made the air shift between us. I swallowed. Is that a good thing? She tilted her head, pretending to think. I haven't decided yet. I laughed, but it came out quieter than I meant it to. A flash of lightning lit up the inside of the car for half a second. Her eyes caught the light, and for a moment she looked vulnerable, in a way she hadn't all night. Then she looked down at her hands and said, almost to herself, I haven't done this in a long time. Done what? Let a night go, wherever it wants. There was something in her voice that made me stop breathing for a second. I turned toward her fully. And where do you think this night wants to go? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and drew a line through the fog gathering on the passenger side window. With the tip of her finger, Then she looked at me. Every instinct in me told me to be careful. She wasn't just beautiful. She was the kind of beautiful that made a man forget his better judgment and call it fate. But there was nothing reckless about the way she looked at me. No game. No performance. Just tension. Warm. Quiet. Pulling us closer, inch by inch. I rested my arm along the back of the seat and watched her. "Tell me something honest," I said. She smiled faintly. "You really like that word." "I do." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Fine, something honest." She took a breath. "When you walked up to me in the coffee shop," she paused, her eyes dropping to my mouth for the briefest second. "I was hoping you would." Long silence. That was it. That was the moment. Everything changed. The storm outside faded into background noise. All I could hear was her breathing. All I could see was the way her lips parted just slightly after she said it. Like she hadn't meant to reveal that much and wasn't sure whether to take it back. I didn't move right away. Neither did she. Long catted her there from me, that are still deciding whether to let it. It's heavier than words. More intimate than touch. Elena broke it first. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she whispered. "Like what?" "Like you're trying very hard not to do something." I smiled a little. "Maybe I am." Her eyes held mine. "And what is it you're trying not to do?" I leaned in just enough to feel the warmth of her breath. "This." I lifted my hand slowly, giving her every chance to stop me, and brushed a damp strand of hair away from her cheek. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into it. The look on her face changed, less guarded, more open, like she was done pretending, not to feel what was happening between us. My thumb traced lightly along the curve of her cheekbone. "Elena." She exhaled shakily. I could have kissed her then. God, I wanted to. But instead, I did something that surprised even me. I leaned forward and pressed the softest kiss to her forehead. Just one. Slow, deliberate, gentle enough to mean something. Her eyes fluttered closed, and when I pulled back, she looked at me like I had undone her, in a way she hadn't expected. "That," she whispered, "was not what I thought you were going to do." I smiled. "Disappointed?" She let out a quiet laugh, but her cheeks had flushed. "No," she said. "Just not used to men choosing tenderness when they have the chance not to." I looked at her for a moment, then said, "Maybe I wanted to make sure you'd remember me for the right reason." Her expression softened. Then, very slowly, she reached for my hand and laced her fingers through mine. "You're making it very hard," she said, "for me to keep pretending. This is just a random night." I turned my hand and held hers tighter. "Then don't pretend." She kept holding my hand, as if letting go would break whatever had formed between us. Outside, the storm was beginning to calm, but inside the car the air still felt charged, warm and close, and full of things we hadn't said yet. Elena looked down at our hands and smiled to herself. "I should probably tell you something," she said. "That sounds serious." "It is." I waited. She looked up at me, and this time there was no teasing in her face, no mystery, just honesty. "I wasn't having a good night before I met you." I stayed quiet. "I almost didn't go into that coffee shop. I almost just went home and let myself be miserable." She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "And then you walked over with that very confident, very suspiciously well-timed line about the rain." I grinned. "You mean my devastating charm worked?" "Unfortunately, yes." Then her smile faded into something more vulnerable. "And now I'm sitting in a dead car, in the middle of a storm, wearing your jacket." She looked at me carefully. "And I don't want this night to end." The honesty in that hit me harder than any flirtation could have. I squeezed her hand. "It doesn't have to end here," I said quietly. Her eyes searched mine, as if trying to decide whether I meant tonight or something after tonight. "Maybe I meant both." She moved closer, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. "Then make me a promise," she whispered. "What kind of promise?" "That when this becomes a memory," she said, "it won't be the kind we regret." I looked at her. Really looked at her, and answered the only way I could. "I promise." A tow truck eventually came. The rain slowed to a drizzle. I drove her home in the back of that awkward, ridiculous truck ride, and somehow even that felt romantic. When we reached her building, Neither of us moved right away. She still had my jacket around her shoulders. You know, I said, I'm probably going to need that back eventually. She smiled and opened the door. Maybe, she said, stepping out into the cool night air. You'll have to see me again. If you want it. I leaned across the seat. Is that your way of asking me out? She bent slightly, looking in through the open door, rain still clinging to the ends of her hair. No, she said, with a smile that nearly ruined me. It's my way of making sure you call. Then she leaned in, kissed my cheek, soft, warm, and far too brief, and stepped back. I watched her walk toward the building entrance, wearing my jacket, like she had every right to keep it. And maybe she did. Because some nights give you a story. Some nights give you a scar. And once in a while, if you're lucky, a storm gives you someone who changes the temperature of your entire life. I still think about that night when it rains, about the coffee shop, the stalled car, the quiet. Put her hand in mine. That look in her eyes when I kissed her forehead instead of her lips. And the truth is, I never got that jacket back. But I got Elena. And somehow, that was the better deal.